Hey America, so do you still think we live in a constitutional republic?
Well, it's a relevant question, of course. If you read the founding documents, you know what our government is supposed to be. Something close to the relevant question got asked in Congress by Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, who is an avowed socialist. He doesn't hide behind labels. He admits he's a socialist. But he asked Federal Reserve Chairman Janet Yellen, quote, "Are we still a capitalist democracy, or have we gone over into an oligarchic form of society in which incredible economic and political power now rests with the billionaire class?" And the question's obvious to anyone paying attention, but look what Janet Yellen said in response. She said she was also concerned about the statistics that Bernie Sanders gave on inequality, the concentration of wealth, and said she's concerned as well. They can determine the ability of different groups to participate equally in the democracy and have grave effects on social stability. And then she said, quote, "And so I don't know what to call our system or how to. I prefer not to give labels, but there's no question we've had a trend towards growing inequality, and I personally find it very worrisome." And there is no question, but she says it deserves the attention of policymakers, and they go back and forth, and Sanders asks about the Koch brothers. She says, yes, it's very concerning, but she ultimately says this is an issue for Congress to decide what's appropriate. And what's key here, what you got to understand, is that it's not completely an issue for Congress. Yeah, there's a lot they could do, and they could stop giving loopholes to these billionaires, but the biggest loophole of all time is the Federal Reserve that was created from the very biggest business interests so they could issue the money and give tax and credit to the government and people while allowing their big businesses and their vast sums of wealth to be concentrated even more. Big businesses got even bigger under the Federal Reserve. They get free money out of it, and they have a way to manipulate the monetary policy, to contract it at will, to expand it at will, and they know how to manipulate the rates. That's how they get rich.
They've already done studies. Here's a study right here. The study, U.S. is an oligarchy, not a democracy. And this is in the BBC, and they lead with the line, the U.S. is dominated by a rich and powerful elite. And this is out of a recent study by a Princeton University professor with a Northwestern University professor, and they teamed up together and ran a statistical analysis. So I thought they were pretty telling. It says, when the preferences of economic elites and the stands of organized interest groups are controlled for, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. Furthermore, the preferences of economic elites, as measured by our proxy, the preferences of affluent citizens, have far more independent impact upon policy change than the preferences of average citizens do. To be sure, this does not mean that ordinary citizens always lose out. They fairly often get the policies they favor, but only because those policies also happen to be preferred by the economically elite citizens who wield the actual influence. It says, in the United States, our findings indicate the majority does not rule, at least not in the casual sense of actually determining policy outcomes. When a majority of citizens disagrees with the economic elites and or with organized interests, they generally lose. Moreover, because the strong status quo bias built into the U.S. political system, even when the fairly large majorities of Americans favor policy change, they generally do not get it.
And of course, the way these studies ask the question is not the proper way to ask the question. We're a constitutional democratic republic where you're supposed to have your rights ingrained, and the system's supposed to be set up so it's as fair as possible, so the monetary system is as sound as possible, and from there you can have individual rights, create individual wealth, then capitalism might be allowed to work. Now, I don't know who wrote this study and what their interests were. We know openly that Sanders' interest is in a form of socialism, so he's going to favor a, quote, democracy. But that's not the debate here. The debate here is that the wealth is concentrated in an oligarchy, a few who control everything, and they now operate worldwide oligarchical collectivist systems where a few at the top benefit from these huge socialist systems. And look what they did with the IRS. They've now found that the IRS is not auditing big businesses. They're auditing Tea Party members and individuals.
Yeah, this came out just the other day as well. These large business partnerships that have multiple partners and have over $100 million in assets never get audited. They don't sometimes get audited, or maybe one of them gets audited. They looked at the figures. The Government Accountability Office found none of them ever get audited. And they made some excuses about how it's just so complex and complicated how these things work that it's just too hard for the IRS to actually audit these because they're just so big. But what I thought was interesting in this article is I went down to read the comments, and this guy Mike said, anytime you want to wake up America, you're living in an oligarchy, democracy is dead. And then you still have someone saying, I agree with you, but we live in a constitutional republic. And I showed up in here and I said, it used to be a constitutional republic. We used to have a democratic process. That's what Mike meant. Now it's an oligarchy. Our country is all about oligarchical collectivism. And then Mike showed up again and said, that's right, the oligarchs spoon-feed us patriotism and democracy in Murica. And you can be proud member of the constitutional republic. That's right, we can all walk around with the proud badge. I live in America. I live in a constitutional republic. And maybe if you just keep saying that to yourself, you'll believe it. But it's obviously not true.
And so it's a vestigial form now. On paper, we're still a constitutional republic, sort of, but it's like a snake born with legs. They don't function. It can't stand on the legs. That beast crawls on its belly. And our system crawls on the belly of oligarchy and insider big business fascism now. And look at the creation of the IRS itself. Why do they not audit big businesses? Why are there so many loopholes? Well, big business created the IRS just a couple months after it created the Federal Reserve in 1913. It was introduced by Senator Aldrich, the maternal grandfather side of the Rockefellers. David Rockefeller and Nelson Rockefeller's grandfather created the bills that created both of those institutions. It's for big business, and it's been explained how it actually is a deterrent to more people becoming wealthy and concentrates the wealth of those who are already the mega rich, because it's a progressive income tax, and the more you make, the more you pay, unless you pay no tax at all. So if you're a millionaire on his way to becoming a billionaire, you're going to pay 10, 15, 20, 30, 40% tax, and they're going to get all the money for the government programs, which are ill-advised, and you'll get a moderate amount of wealth. The billionaires who have offshore vehicles, who put their money in tax-free foundations, and who know how to cross all their I's and lowercase j's and never pay taxes, well, they keep most of their wealth, and they use it to direct social agendas, while you pay into agendas you probably don't agree with.
See that look on her face? That look? That's the, oh no, I did just say that.
But they won't ask the relevant question about the agency she heads and the role they play in maintaining that oligarchy. It's outrageous, but we're definitely not a constitutional republic anymore. We're not even a democracy. That's ridiculous.